There are a bunch of different ways to do cel shading, not only technique-wise, but also style-wise. But in this video, I'll show you guys a basic way of doing cel shading, and I'll also explain some of the shading fundamentals you need to know. Usually for shading, there are a bunch of different fundamentals you need to know, like how edges work, how values work, how to blend, but for cel shading, we don't have to do any of that. Instead, the only thing that really matters is the light direction. Light gets emitted from a light source. This light radiates out, and when it hits an object, it bounces off of that object. That light then hits your eye, and that lets you see. So it's a physical interaction. We have a light beam that's traveling in a certain direction, it hits the object at a certain area, that light bounces back, and that area is what we then see as being illuminated. Everything that's not being hit by that light beam will be in shadow. In shading, this is why it's important to know where your light source is positioned, because it determines what will be in light and shadow. To know what direction something is facing, we need to know how it exists in space, and this is why it's important to think about things in terms of forms like boxes. If the light source is here, the box will be illuminated a certain way, and if we place an object inside of the box, that object will be illuminated similarly. Now, of course, real objects don't have flat planes like boxes. Instead, they might have curved forms. The way these work in real life is the part of the object that's most perpendicular to the light source will be the brightest, and as the form turns away, it'll get less bright until eventually we get a harsh transition to the shadow side. This transition exists because this is the point where the surface is completely facing away from the light, and thus it can't receive any light from it. This concept is really important for cel shading because with this type of shading, we only use harsh edges, we don't really use gradients. That means that to place the shadow, you need to know exactly where the object turns away from the light source, and the only way to know that is to get a feel for how the object exists in 3 dimensions. And to know that, you need to understand how to use boxes, which I've covered in other tutorials. Now that's basically it when it comes to the light fundamentals. Now for the actual shading, I'm going to be using Clip Studio Paint, but I think every drawing program should be able to use the functions that I'm going to be using. And this isn't that complicated, so there are a bunch of different ways you can do it. Now, one way to do it would be how they do it in animation studios, where even the shadows are outlined using line work, and then if you're going to color it, all the person has to do is use the bucket tool, and you can fill in huge areas of color immediately. And then for the shadows, we would just grab a different color and do that. Now for most people, this will probably be too time consuming, and it might be slightly too difficult too, because you need to know exactly what you want your shadow to look like so that you can draw it. Another way you can do it, and this is what we're going to do, is you can fill in the drawing with a base color, and this is usually the color used for the light areas. Then you can create a second layer and use the clipping mask feature, and then you can draw on top of this layer and just draw your shadow on top of it. Now every software should have a clipping mask feature, but basically the way it works is you draw something on one layer, you create a second layer, and then in Clip Studio all you have to do is press this button right here, and that clips it to the layer below it, which means that anything that you draw on this second layer will be restricted to only cover what you drew on the first layer. Now for shading, this is very useful, because if we have a base color, all we have to do is create a clipping layer, and then we can just draw our shadow color on top of that. You can use this in a bunch of different ways too, like for example, let's say we make a line drawing of a box, and let's say we don't want our lines to be black. What we can do is create another layer, make it a clipping mask, and then we can color the lines on that layer. Now that's one thing. The second thing would be the brushes we're going to be using, or well, there's only one brush we really need, and that's a hard-edged brush without pressure opacity, so it just puts down a very solid color. In Clip Studio Paint, you can use the standard G pen that comes with Clip Studio Paint by default, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the other softwares just have a normal round brush. And then the other thing we're going to be using would be the bucket tool or the fill tool. I'm pretty sure, again, every drawing software should have this, but this lets us color a whole area at once. The only downside to the bucket tool is that it requires your lines to be connected. So for example, if I leave a gap in between the line like that, and I try to use the bucket tool to fill it, the color is going to bleed through and cover the whole thing. But if we actually connect the line like this, you can see that it colors only what's inside of it. Now, the first thing we'd have to do is get the base colors down, and the easiest way to do that would be to just use the bucket tool to fill all of this stuff in. But kind of a problem is that this is just a sketch, so I still have all of these gaps in between these lines, and if I try to put a color there, it just bleeds through it and colors the whole canvas. The way you can deal with that is either you do a second pass where you clean up all the lines and you make sure those gaps are gone, or what I usually do is I just use the G pen to cover all of these gaps, and then I use the bucket tool to fill them. It doesn't look super clean because there's still these little blocks of color that stick out, and you may have even seen these in a lot of the drawings that I use for my videos. So if you want this to be really clean, you're going to have to do a second pass and clean up all of the line work. But I think that's too time consuming and this is passable enough. Also, if you're still a beginner, you might be wondering which colors should you actually choose, and the colors for the most part come down to being a stylistic choice. In the beginning, you might not have a sense for which colors work, so I recommend just color picking from official art and just using that. And then eventually you'll get an idea for which colors work and which ones don't. Now, for the actual shading application, like I said in the first section of the video, you need to know what your light direction is. That's the most important thing when it comes to doing this type of shading. In this case, I'm just going to say that the light is coming from here. So everything that's facing away, like everything that's on this side, is going to be in shadow. Now, kind of the problem is, I can't explain to you where you should and shouldn't place shadows because it kind of depends on your ability to see in 3 dimensions. Like for example, in this area, I know that the light is coming from over here, like I said, so the back of the shoulder is going to be in shadow. That's not something you can just know, but you just have to keep practicing until eventually you understand where this exists in 3D space. So again, if you're still a beginner, you are going to struggle a lot with what should and shouldn't be in shadow. I wouldn't worry about it too much in the beginning. Instead, just focus on coloring things and making it look the way you want it to look. And then just keep studying how light works, look at references, look at how other artists use shadows or where they place their shadows, and then eventually you'll start to get an idea for where you should place your shadows. Now, one thing you may notice is that I put my colors down very messy, and if you compare this to the reference, you can see that in the reference all of these are super clean. And the reason for that is because the way they did it is they used that method I talked about at the start, where they outlined all of the shadows using lines first, and then when they use the bucket tool, it creates a very clean shape. Now, technically, you can still do that here with the way I'm doing it. Like, for example, right here, you can just draw the actual shape and then bucket fill it, and it creates a much cleaner shape. But that also takes significantly more time. So it kind of depends on how much time you want to spend on the project. Usually for my sketches, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I have so many drawings that I need to make, so I try to get these done as quickly as possible. But if you want to make a cleaner drawing, you're going to have to spend more time on it. Also, with clothing, you can have a bunch of colors next to each other. Like for example, we have white, red, yellow, and if you're going to put down the base colors for these, you could use different layers, which is what I like to do. Or you could also have them all on the same layer. The problem with having them on the same layer is that you have to be very careful when you're doing your shading, because like for example, if I'm shading the skirt with this color, I can very easily cross over into the white, and then I have to delete that so that I can put down the actual white shadow color. So for clothing, I'd say put all of the colors on separate layers, unless of course the 2 colors that you have are so far away from each other that they don't really affect each other. Like for example, the skirt is all the way down here and the armor is all the way up here. In this case, if I'm shading the armor, there isn't really a way for me to, you know, accidentally bleed into the skirt, so I can just shade this freely. Meaning I don't really have to put them all on separate layers. So here are all of the layers. Looks like a lot, but we have one layer for the skin, which of course has the skin shading on top of it. We have one for the hair, which has one for the hair shading, as well as for the hair highlight. There's one for the white part of the clothing, one for the red part, as well as the armor, one for the yellow part, and one for the other red parts, one for the sword, and then the last two are for the whites of the eyes and one for the eyes themselves. So the act of doing the cel shading is not that difficult. It's just putting down a color and then putting another color on top of it. The hard part is knowing where to put your shadows, and that comes down to understanding three-dimensional forms. But if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, let me know in the comments what else you want to see. You can support the channel through the YouTube memberships, which are linked in the description, and you can also join our Discord server if you want me to tell you to do your homework. But I guess I'll catch you all next time.